Let's cross now to Gauteng, where the Premier David Makhura is leading the return to the classroom. He's addressing the media now. Let's go there live.
Below 18 who didn't qualify earlier on. So even as we start this academic year, we want to make a call that those who are not vaccinated, please continue to take this opportunity of the availability of vaccines to do so. And if you were not convinced that vaccines do work, just look at what happened as the pandemic was evolving. Yes, we went through a very difficult, very ravaging, terrible third wave with the Delta variant. We lost many lives that time. We had many people admit our healthcare system was not coping during the third wave. Omicron has been different during the fourth wave, but the principal explanation really is that the fact that more people were vaccinated in Gauteng province. We have over 4 million people who are fully vaccinated as we speak, over 4 million. Just about 5 million of them have a single dose of each, but over 4 million, from the report we received yesterday, over 4 million of them are fully vaccinated. We have administered in our province over 7 million vaccine doses, and we are ready also to do the booster shots, particularly for those sections of the population who are vulnerable, who have been predisposed to chronic ailments, and those who are senior citizens. So I want to emphasize that we are in a much better position to deal with the threat of this pandemic, the ongoing threat of this pandemic. We are in a much better position. We are better informed. We have vaccines available. And even as individuals, we just know what not to do if you want to avoid exposing yourselves. We also know what to do when you have been exposed to going out like today. We also know what to do. When you get back, what do you do? So there's much more information, there's much more evidence that masking, wearing your mask, I hope many of you may say, I have been with people who later reported that they were infected with COVID. I've been with a lot of them, but just keeping in a disciplined and compromised way, keeping your mask on helps you a great deal to limit the exposure. And I know it is tempting, and we see that even when we get in halls like this, it's tempting. When we see our friends in the media, Happy New Year media, you would like us to take off our masks, I know that. But my own experience is that even you would know, some of you would, as in the nature of your work in the media, you have also been in the vicinity of people later who reported that they're positive. But when you have your mask on, we know that does work. We want to repeat this message. The masks do work. Vaccination does work. To the extent that we can, avoiding crowded spaces does work. So, getting into 2022, knowing what we know, with all the arsenals we have in our hands, certainly we've got to manage the pandemic differently. And one thing we can afford is complete shutdown again and again. So that we know quite a lot about the pandemic. The economy cannot afford it. People whose livelihoods depends on going out there to sell or to play music or to do performances, the creative industry people or the sports personalities, people in the various sectors of our economy who earn incomes either by selling or by working, cannot afford again, as we go into the third year, we can afford the switching on and off of our economy. As I say, we know quite a lot. We have built a great deal of capacity. But let me come back to schools. I think that there's a grave danger. Evidence is coming to the fore that having the rotational system, which was introduced understandably as part of managing the pandemic, but the rotational attendance of learners is really not working. When some learners are at school and others are on this day or on the following days, and then others are at home, and then they will come on other days. This is a major disruption, and it does have a huge impact on the long-term development of our children. And therefore, it is like we are building a foundation. Education is the foundation of a house called the nation. The strongest foundation you can ever build is how much serious you put in your education system. And for every child, for every community, for every citizen, to get decent education. So we are deeply concerned. I want to repeat this. We are deeply concerned that if we don't soon get to some measure of normality with regard to bringing back all the learners, many of whom are at home, there will be long-term consequences that would be difficult to bear. There's all evidence already. We have over 1,200 schools, mainly in the township, that are doing rotation at the moment. Because we can't comply with the current regulations of social distancing. What does this do? It leaves many of these learners at home. Schools lose teaching time, the teachers lose teaching time, and these learners also lose learning time. But there are also other consequences. There's mental distress that accumulates and is associated with the fact that the more we have our children attending school in the way we are, it's distress for parents. It is distress for us as parents. Because this system has an impact on parents, and I'll come back to that point, particularly on women. But there's also evidence that the rotational system, where some of our learners stay at home and they can't come to school on all the days, this also has an impact on violence and abuse. These children, when parents are away at work and kids are at home in the communities, and there's nobody set for sure certain what's happening with these children. Whereas the schools are the safest places when a parent goes to work and the child is at school. At least at that time that the child is at school, the parent cannot be worried about what's happening with my child. But there's also other consequences. When these children are at home, they miss the school-based meals. Now, feeding, the school nutrition program is an important development intervention in the growth and development of our children. And we have seen it during COVID, especially during 2020 when we had various lockdowns. The impact of this, the fact that, and sometimes as people, we don't take seriously the impact that the school nutrition is having just on making sure that children from poor households have something more decent to eat. So they miss their meals. This also, again, has a huge impact on their own development. Children who are out of school, we also have more evidence that shows that when children are out of school, the burden shifts to the mothers. This burden shifts to women, the burden of care. When these children are not at school, for those days that they are not at school, the burden shifts to women about what they do. As I said earlier on, the parents who are working have to make a plan now which was not there before. about what do I do with my child on the days that the child is not at school. So this is a significant social and disorganizing impact that must be attended to. So we are going to pay priority to this matter. The Minister of Education needs to know, Minister Njimotsecha, that we support the effort of the department as you make representation to the National Coronavirus Command Council. We want our children to return to schools. We really, really want our children to return to schools. Of course, we say return to school safely because we now know how to manage the pandemic, having gone through it again and again. Of course, in so doing, we will continue to work with the education stakeholders, especially the teachers' unions, to do so. But we can't go into another full year. No. We can't go into another full year, not full 2022, with a rotational system. I listened to the minister very carefully this morning. As you were talking about the problem we have with those learners who are not yet allocated to schools, you were saying we'll solve this problem by the end of this month. We definitely want to see the return of all our learners into schools as soon as possible. And I think there have also been scientists who have argued that learners are much safer in school than when they are not in school. And that's something that we really, really want to support. Having said that, on COVID-19, I also want to say that this year we want to focus on the reopening of the economy. It is extremely critical that we get more people back to work. And I've made this point already, that we want to see more sectors of our economy opening. We want to see various sectors that generate income for people opening. We want to see more people able to support their own livelihoods and their families. This also includes much more enhanced interventions around the economic recovery, a lot of which we will talk about. But education is central. If the government starts the year, the most important thing at the beginning of the year is education. And so the point we are making today, again, is that we need to increase greater levels of normality. We know we will get further work. The advisory committee on COVID-19 in our province, which also works with the national one, is doing more modeling to give us indications of what may be coming. We hope, and I'm talking about hope here, we hope we are reaching a period where we will transition from a pandemic to an endemic. And I'm saying we hope. And all these things we say we must do are important. Our efforts on vaccination are critically important to help this transition from a pandemic to an endemic, because we don't want to return to shutdown. We must continue to manage the various phases. We want the management of the pandemic to be done, but we must do so with an increased pace of opening up. In other words, in 2022, we need more opening up of the economy. And I'm not suggesting reckless opening up. Of course, we must continuously monitor these developments. Is there a new variant? But 2022 must really be the year that we see greater movement out of the switching on and off, and the start and go of various sectors. And that must start with our schools. That's what I want to emphasize. It must start with our schools. So today we are here to open this school, Setlabucha, primary. This is a new type of school. In 2016, we were in this vicinity in 2016 on our work, doing community work on Teresano, And amongst many issues that members of the community raised were about the fact that what we had here was a small old school together with some, what do you call those, education at this mobile classroom. The community was quite unhappy, and amongst the many things they said they really need to see tremendous progress on was we need a new primary school.
All right, that Gauteng Premier David Makhura.